Welcome to another edition of the Gruber Morning Show Roadster Edition, sponsored by the Gruber Companies.
The lowest mile Roadster has sold.
And more Tesla Roadster auction results.
Finding a 4 gig memory stick is hard, but there's a workaround.
It's a workaround, right. And what are the most popular Roadster upgrades that we see? Well, this and other stories. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner.
So first thing that we want to hit is the auction results. Roadsters are selling. And there are more Roadsters for sale currently than I have ever seen. The reasons are numerous. And some people are going to our Roadster matchmaking site. Others are going back to Bring a Trailer. And let me show you some of the Bring a Trailer auction results recently. A 25,000-mile 2008 Tesla Roadster, fully functioning, radiant red, sold for $75,900. And that was December 27th. A 43,000-mile 2008 Roadster, bid to $73,500, and that was $12,20. Then a 2,800-mile Roadster. Now, get the mileage on it, 2,800 miles.
2,800 miles.
Yeah, and it had an R80 pack upgrade, and it had just been put in September, like
That's
a month
right.
or two before.
I remember that, yes.
That car got to $90,500. And then the 27,000-mile Roadster, a 2010, 2.5, which bid up to $85,000, and that was October 13th as well. The bottom line here is if you're looking to sell your Roadster, $70,000, $80,000 is about what you're going to get for it in this market. And unless, of course, you have a pedigreed car, but even then, the 2,800-mile Roadster with the R80 pack in it, a brand new R80 pack, indicates that that may not be the case either.
Yeah, I mean, the R80 pack is almost like the equivalent for an ICE engine replacement.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a new power source, and I mean a brand new power source, and this one could be the same kind that lasts for 10 or 15 years, like a good engine would, and like these version 1 battery packs have.
Right.
So what a deal that one was.
So people ask, well, why? Well, it's the law of supply and demand has taken over. And when you have a surplus of inventory, the prices come down.
Yeah.
We just have not seen anything like this yet. And the reasons for selling are numerous. They range from some of the owners can't get in and out of the cars anymore. Remember, the Tesla Roadster requires what's called the Roadster wiggle. And if you've had back surgery, knee surgery, hip surgery, you're not going to be able to do that wiggle anymore to get in and out of the car.
Right. When we've talked about this before, a lot of the people who would have bought Tesla Roadsters now, working on 16 years ago now, are people that were probably wealthy enough that they could put aside $120,000 to $150,000, and if they totally lost it, it wasn't a big deal. So that means you had to have a fairly high level of wealth. That's going to tend to be people who are in their late 40s to early 60s. So just do the math. Now you're talking about people who are in their mid 60s to nearly 80 years old.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, some of those people, they had large amounts of disposable income. It put them in a certain age group, definitely. And there's nothing wrong with the cars, by the way. The cars are the same as they've always been. They're still going to be collectible. They are still valuable. They're still iconic. It's just that we have way too many for sale right now. And the advice that I typically give people that say, I'm thinking about selling my Roadster, my first comment is don't. Timing's bad. It'll recover. Have a little faith. Be patient. Put it in storage. Do something other than dump it right now.
Yeah, at some point, the law of supply and demand will continue doing its thing. Demand will pick up. Supply is static. It's not going to be going up over the years because there are only a certain number of these cars, and the supply will continue to dwindle as cars crash and become otherwise disabled.
Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, it is a buyer's market. For those of you that look at our Roadster matchmaking site on our website, remember those prices are asking prices. They are negotiable often, and if you see something that you really like, our job is to do the dating service. As we've been affectionately called, we are the Tinder of the Roadster world, and we will unite buyer with seller, and then we back away, and you guys work out your best deal. So don't let the price stop you, is I guess what I'm saying. Looks like we've got a few people chiming in. Highlander continued from the first podcast. He says, was busy on the convertible conversion. Sorry, my apologies. Kindness is always free. Thank you, Highlander.
Thank you, Highlander. On LinkedIn, Nazir Gohari, Master of Science in Engineering. Good morning, gents.
Good morning, and thank you. That was
Thank
from
you for
LinkedIn.
joining.
Yeah. All right, another news item on the Tesla Roadsters. By the way, before we get to that, you notice that wonderful sunset behind me with what looks like a Tesla Roadster. It's AI generated, of course. The reason I decided to go with a sunset picture is we've had a lot of them here in Arizona within the last month. I've posted 2 of them on Facebook. And again, yesterday morning, everybody was probably sleeping off a hangover. I was up very early in the morning, was in the shop at 6:30. It was dark when I got here, and within an hour or so, I saw through the windows this wonderful glow of orange light and went outside, and sure enough, it was another one of those magnificent Arizona sunrises. So that's what actually stimulated this picture behind me. I asked AI, give us a blue 2008 Tesla Roadster with a wonderful Arizona sunset behind it.
And it did not disappoint. I will argue that the Arizona sunrises and sunsets are some of the best in the world.
And it looks like we even get some red powder-coated brake calipers on this car. Do you notice that?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
By the way, those are available on our e-store, and we're highly recommending stay away from the painted versions. You get some carb cleaner on that or some brake cleaner, and it may take the paint off. Powder coating will not allow that to happen. Far more durable.
Mm-hmm.
So one of our German Roadster contacts, Marco Nolte, who now goes by Marco No, by the way, shortened the last name quite a bit, it looks like. He posted on a Facebook site, and he's working on something that we had been working on. Do we have the ability to bring up images, guys? Okay. If we can bring up image number 1 to begin with, what Marco was originally working on within the last few months was a replacement battery pack for the Tesla Roadster.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, he was taking Taycan battery modules, figuring out a way to make the firmware in the Roadster happy, created a new case for the Tesla Roadster, and he's been making progress on actually using Porsche batteries in the Tesla Roadster. Well, he's got something else he's working on now, as this post indicates. He says, as a holiday treat, I'd like to share some findings from a study that he's been conducting. It's well known that the power electronics can face challenges due to aging insulation material between the IGBTs and the heat sinks. And what he's talking about there is something that we discovered in 2014. There is an insulating material and heat transfer material that goes between the power boards or the phase boards and the IGBT transistors. Each one of these little silver things is a transistor basically connected in parallel for additional power capability. And this then mates up to a heatsink. Now, this is a little bit smaller than the one that's in the Tesla Roadster. But as you can see, its function in life is to have a lot of fins like a radiator, a thick chunk of aluminum that then sits up against the transistors and transfers all that heat to the heatsink, which then has a fan or forced air running across the fins to keep your transistors cool. However, there's 400 volts DC on the metal portions of this transistor. So if you were to put this board onto that aluminum heatsink, you would have fireworks immediately. So to prevent that, they take these strips of insulating material and lay that to separate the IGBT transistors from the aluminum heatsink. Now, what we found in 2014 is that the original insulating material that was used by Chroma in Taiwan, who built the power electronic, the PEMs as they call them, or the power electronic modules, that insulating material that they used is beginning to dry up, it's beginning to crumble, and it's beginning to deteriorate. And there were Tesla Roadster PEMs that actually blew up as a result of that insulating material shorting the transistors to the heat sinks. What we then developed was a procedure for replacing these, and we called it it was an engineering change order to upgrade the insulating material. We did a lot of research and found that this particular vendor, brand, and style has the best heat transfer capabilities. And it turns out that Marco is taking it to the next step. He's investigating this material and potentially hoping to find an even better material that does a better job of heat transfer for those transistors. So let me continue reading what he's been working on. He says, we put 2 insulation materials to the test and included a diagram to showcase the results. Material A, which is the Bergquist GPHC 5.0 that's used on phase A and C with varying torque settings. And by the way, what he's talking about there is these power boards have the ability to torque the transistors to the insulating material, and there's a very specific torque that is required to get maximum heat transfer. He says material B, which is Keratherm 86/400, is used on phase B. The diagram that he has illustrates the heat sink temperature over time. Significantly, material B demonstrated a much faster heat transfer to the heat sinks compared to material A. Now, that's why I popped that picture up. If we can pop that back up, we've been working on the same thing, and you can see there is a dial caliper there, which is actually measuring the amount of torque that power board is being subjected to against the heatsink material. And picture number 2, by the way, is a write-up that shows what our results are so far. The quest for us is identical to Marco's. What we want to do is find an even better insulating material or better torque settings, because it's no secret that Tesla Roadsters, especially in hot climates like ours in Phoenix, Arizona, have a very difficult time staying cool enough to where you don't go into limp mode or into power limiting mode, because that is the firmware's answer to the transistors getting too hot. And the way that it senses that is in every heat sink, there is a thermistor that is buried inside the aluminum, which then is monitored by the firmware. Looks like we've got a bunch of questions here and some comments. LinkedIn, Nazir Guhari. We already said that. Good morning. Yeah. Instagram, SGR89011. If Gruber Motors didn't do such a great job in resurrecting Roadsters, the prices would be higher. Good point. Thank you.
Well, that's quite a compliment, but that's definitely true as well. Khaled Muhammad on Facebook sends us several roses and a smiley face. Thank you very much, and glad to have you on the podcast today.
And then YouTube Level Null says, hi, Pete and Mark. First time watching live today while designing the Taycan battery pack version 2. Interesting. You know, for any of you that can't watch the live portion of our Roadster podcast, these are posted, of course, out on YouTube.
Yes. And
it turns out we get more views after the podcast than we do during the podcast. So it looks like that's a popular way to stay updated.
Is Level Null the gentleman who is designing the Roadster battery pack using the Taycan modules?
He is, yes. Yeah, okay. That's Marco Nolte.
Awesome.
So then he continues. He says, this is just the first phase of the research. And by the way, Marco is a eminent scientist in the Roadster world. He's very knowledgeable. He was one of our first subcontractors that helped us get a bunch of flood-damaged Model S's running, and he was able to remote into the MCUs and uncover errors and DTCs and clear them and help us get those cars running.
Yeah, he was instrumental in helping guide us in the mechanical work that we needed to do so that we could do the right work and get these cars up and running. And many of those cars are still running today.
Yep. And so anyway, he has credentials. he is definitely someone to be listened to. So he says, this was just the first phase of the research with more materials to be examined. The goal is to enhance the durability and performance of the Roadsters. He says, if anyone has experimented with different insulating materials, I'd be very interested in a canned log of your findings. Such collaboration efforts can greatly benefit the community. Now, what he said there actually mirrors what a lot of the Roadster owners that are technical are committed to, and that is to help the Roadster community. There are a number of people that have even devised products and, aftermarket type products, like Henry Sharp with his Can Junior and Can Senior adapters.
Right. And we have the Dean Richardson, I think is his name, with all the carbon fiber, custom carbon fiber in pieces that and parts that he's manufactured for Roadsters.
Eric Robertson.
See, I'm terrible with names.
He's currently in Thailand, by the way, and I didn't realize that he has roots there. He actually grew, or at least partially grew up there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But yeah, carbon fiber expert, and then, of course, other carbon fiber vendors that have come along since then.
Yes.
That have created aftermarket product for the Tesla Roadster. So he says, let's work together to keep our Roadsters running smoothly for many more miles. Happy holidays and safe driving. Thank you, Marco. And we definitely do need to get some collaboration going, because we're a bit further maybe down that road than he was, since we started this project actually months ago. One of the contributors in Texas chimed in, Scott Weber, and he says, nice, but not to dampen your work. Did you also do the test swapping the material between phases? The underside, heat sinks, can have different airflow, including debris and turbulence. And he makes a good point there. As the Roadster starts to age after its annual preventive maintenance, where they blow out all of the heat sink, dust, debris, and picture this. You've got two fans down below, fairly low in the car, that are acting like little vacuum cleaners.
Right.
Unfiltered, picking up dust, debris, leaves, twigs, bugs, you name it. And eventually those can get lodged in between these heat sink fins. And as that happens, it reduces the ability for it to provide thermal management or cooling.
Sure. Scott does make a good point, and I'm sure that Marco will do this as well. Now that he has a hypothesis that his item B, as it were, is potentially more effective than the item A, then he will probably move this to phase 1 or to the phase 3 board. Or in this, because I know each of these boards just handles a single phase of the electrical, just do some board swapping, and he can do the testing that way as well.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that we found in our work that we did on the Roadsters was we received a signature Roadster a couple summers ago, and written inside the PEM on the aluminum fan shield, or the fan mount, was with a Sharpie. This PEM has been modified for heat-sensitive issues. And we were really curious. It's one of the things that you don't do in production. You don't, modify the product, because then you're the people that work on it afterwards are never sure, what's different.
Right.
And swapping parts back into it may cause a problem. But they were kind enough to at least give us a warning. So the next thing we did was reverse engineered. And what we found was that there were some components replaced on the DMC board that actually changed the sensitivity to heat-related problems. We had also heard a story about a Roadster in the early days that was in Dubai, or Abu Dhabi, I think it was. And the owner there was annoyed by the fact that he couldn't, trounce the Mercedes and all the other exotic cars that are in that area of the world, because when it got really hot, he was being power limited, and it didn't have its maximum horsepower. So Tesla flew a couple of engineers, one from Germany, one from the U.S., there to solve this problem. And they did. They made some modifications and improved the design somewhat.
So what we're saying then is that the PEM is, for safety reasons, power limiting at a temperature that might be lower than what it could actually run at.
That's what we're saying. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Instagram.
On Instagram, SGR89011 asks, did you read the article about a Tesla robot attacking a worker? I cannot believe some of the headlines about Tesla.
You know, you have to admit, though, it made great headlines.
It did. Did you read that article?
Oh, I did, and it was wonderful clickbait. But yeah, very poor form.
It was terrible form.
Yeah, it is akin to reporting something and taking it out of context for your own personal purposes and gain.
Oh, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I saw on Twitter, somebody had posted the headline of that article, and then they posted a clip from Terminator 2 where it's like, or it's one of the new Terminators where it's like about to kill this guy and it's dragging him across the floor, and they said this is what they made it sound like. Basically, it was this clip from Terminator.
And, you know, let's not forget that robots and humans have existed even into the last century. It's just that the bots that we had back then didn't look humanoid. They were usually arms that swung out and picked up a piece of metal and transferred it to a punch press or to a brake, you know, to bend the steel or whatever it was.
You know, for generations, you just go to an old sawmill.
Mm-hmm.
It's an engine performing work in a somewhat automated fashion. It's a robot.
Right.
And sawmills have existed for 150 years.
Yeah, good point. All right. We've got a picture to bring up here, Jesse. It's the Doll-E version. And what we have here is a speculation about VIN 686. Those of you unfamiliar with that VIN, that is the Roadster that Elon sent into outer space years ago. And it is a custom color called Midnight Cherry. And we were speculating, what happens if this Roadster lands on a remote planet somewhere? What would happen? And here's an artist representation, AI representation of what would be happening if this Roadster was discovered by aliens, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe this is humans, you know, hundreds of thousands of years from now. We've evolved somewhat further on this planet. But we thought this might be a good one to pop up. Someone else had pointed out that the Tesla Roadster that went into space has the most miles. And we happen to have, and that's what prompted this, the Tesla Roadster with the lowest miles on the planet at 38 miles.
That's right.
Some of you may have thought that that would be the Chinese barn find Roadsters. It turns out it wasn't, because after we did our diagnostics on those 3 Chinese Roadsters, we found that all 3 of them had over 100 miles range. And Tesla had changed their testing or their QC at one point for test driving from 30 miles to 100 miles because of some QC issues they wanted to flush out. So the one that's currently in our shop has 38 real miles. It is what we believe at this point to be the absolute lowest mileage Roadster on the planet. And so anyway, what this person pointed out, that VIN 686 is the highest mileage Roadster. It's made 4 orbits around the sun, and at this point, it's totaling 4 trillion miles. All right. So let's see what else we've got here. We've got some comments here. We've got TikTok chiming in. ATS.Gold Energy says, hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
And on YouTube, Crunch to Grace Hopper has joined us today. Like number 3 from Newport Beach, SoCal. Caught up soon. He gives us great advice and for everyone. Smash that thumb, y'all. I want to race the OG Roadster. So what are the high mileage shells going for?
Well, a high mileage Roadster typically is under 100,000 miles. There, you know, people just don't drive them that much. We have one in town here that actually has, I think, 120 miles on it. And the battery is definitely indicating that it's a high mileage Roadster. I think his CAC is under 100 at this point. It's in the 90s somewhere.
Okay.
And his range is 120 miles or so, or less. No, it's actually under 100 because he has a hard time when he brings it in the shop for his annual, and he lives out in Goodyear.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's touch
Yeah.
and go. He has to get a full charge before he leaves our shop.
Yes.
All right. So one of the things that we discovered or that we reported on is when your Roadster has a problem, and it's nothing obvious, TPMS sensor, for example, reporting is failing, and a log file is a great way to give an expanded look what's going on under the hood. And in order to get a log file from your Roadster, you have to have a memory stick. And this memory stick is, because of the Roadster's age, limited to 4 gigs.
That's right.
And people are having a hard time finding 4 gig memory sticks. By the way, I went on Amazon last week and I hunted, and I did find a package of 10 and bought them. So if you're in trouble and you don't have a 4 gig, you can always call us and we'll send you one for free. In the meantime, though, now our IT department, run by Mark actually, discovered a workaround.
Yeah, we because these 4 gig sticks are getting harder and harder to find. I ran an experiment a few months ago and said, okay, well, let's take an 8 gig stick and see if we can turn it into a 4 gig stick. We have full instructions on a recent Roadster newsletter. The short answer is yes. And the short description is you take the partitioning software that's part of Windows, delete the partition on that drive, and then simply recreate a partition that's 4 gigabytes or less.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put it in what's called the FAT32. It's a 30 format, and that means file allocation table 32-bit. It's one of the formats that Windows allows, and you have yourself a 4 gig stick, even if you actually bought an 8 or a 16 or a 32. You just happen to have unformatted space on that stick as well, but the Roadster sees it as a 4 gig stick. It's happy and life goes on.
Mm-hmm. And what you do then is you put a folder out there on that memory stick, and they're very explicit instructions, and it's case sensitive, by the way, which sometimes people miss as well. For a full set of instructions how to generate a log file on our website under newsletters, the How to Pull a Log File newsletter has been updated with Mark's workaround to convert any larger gig memory stick to 4 gig. And there it gives you very specific instructions. It takes about 5 minutes or so to download a log file. And all you need to do then is email that to us. It will be a .tar extension file. And once we get that, we will do a full analysis on what's going on with your Roadster. By the way, this is another absolutely free service that we offer. There's no charge for engineering time, for deciphering, and for the response. Very valuable, though, because it gives us, or sometimes the service centers, a glimpse into what is going on and, a prognosis.
Yeah, it gives us really, really valuable data. This is the next extension of your car being a computer. The log file contains 1 second drive information, 1 minute drive information, every 10-minute drive information. So it actually maps out when you're accelerating your Roadster, what that acceleration looks like. As well as, of course, any errors that it encounters. It keeps logs of those errors and things like that. And so that, combined with the knowledge base that we have, allows us to understand what's going on with the Roadster, what kind of things might be needed to fix that Roadster, and we can do it all without actually having the Roadster in the house.
Mm-hmm. So again, free service. All you need to do is email us the log file. We reviewed our service history from time to time. And what I'd like to share with you is the most common errors or problems that we find with Roadsters once they come in for a variety of reasons. The battery got bricked. The PEM stopped functioning. The insulating material shorted and you've got a blown PEM. You've got problems elsewhere in the electronics on the car. But the other things that we typically find, and this is probably ranked in the order of occurrence or importance, is TPMS sensors. Very few Roadsters come in here that don't have a TPMS sensor error reporting going on. And the reason for that is those little Schrader valves that are on your wheels. Behind it, inside the wheel, is a little piece of electronics that senses tire pressure. And that has a battery embedded in it as well. And these batteries don't last forever. So when you start getting the TPMS errors, it typically starts with one reporting your right rear tire is low on pressure or just TPMS error. It doesn't make any sense at all to change just one because the other three are sure to follow because they're most likely from the same vintage. So we recommend changing all four at once, and that TPMS error goes away. And it's somewhat annoying. While you're driving, you know, it'll repeatedly pop up every 3 to 5 minutes or so. It happens every time you start the car. Another common one, peeling headlights. It's almost as if the clear coat on the headlights got a sunburn, and it's starting to peel. So that's another one that is very common that we see on a lot of Roadsters.
Didn't we find out a little bit of what is causing that peeling to occur in the first place?
Well, we believe that it is the quality of the material that was originally put onto the headlights as a clear coat and the preparation. So what we have is a highly UV resistant clear coat, and then we put a ceramic coating on top of that to give it even more durability, or sometimes PPF.
Right.
Depends on the customer.
Right. Okay.
And we're going to get into PPF in just a moment because that's the fourth item. The third one is paint correction. You know, these Roadsters have been out there for years. And yeah, we do our best to wipe them down and wax them, and we don't always use the cleanest rags, so you end up getting scratches and swirl marks. There isn't a Roadster that comes in these days that doesn't benefit from a paint correction. And what that means is we actually are able to take off a very tiny layer of the paint, which then takes the clear coat, I should say, and it gets rid of all the scratches and swirl marks, and these Roadsters just end up looking like brand new. We've got a Signature 100 in the shop right now, and it was twilight blue, faded, it had swirl marks. It just wasn't very appealing. And the other day I went in there and I looked at it, and it looked like a gleaming new car. That twilight blue just shone a mile deep.
Wow.
So that's another item that we commonly find. And then the fourth one is PPF. Not that we put PPF necessarily on the car, which we're also able to do, of course, but if the PPF has aged beyond 8 years, you want to get it off of that car. And the reason being is numerous. It not only begins to cloud, oftentimes it has some chips or something where it's done its job and protected the paint. But the primary reason is it gets foggy and or the adhesive begins to crystallize. And if it bonds with the clear coat, the only way to get it off then, the faded, yellowed, cloudy PPF, is you may have a repaint problem. And we had that on a Radiant Red that came out of Florida. Try as we may, we got the PPF off in most of the areas, but the front clip just would not cooperate and it required a repaint. So PPF removal is the fourth item that we commonly see. We should probably get caught up on some of the comments here.
Yes, on Instagram, Up in My Panda Tree says, I noticed with a lot of rain in New York, people are driving through large puddles thinking the car can go through it. Why is this? Won't the cars break easily?
Well, Elon has said that the Teslas could double as a boat at certain times. The latest one is a Cybertruck.
Right.
And there's that one video of in China where there was an underpass, and the water must have been 3 feet deep. And that Tesla Model S just went through that and came out the other end. It's risky, let me put it that way. In most cases, you may be able to get away with that. But for example, in the early Model S's, there is a boot that covers both the high voltage, high current pins and the CAN signal pins. And it's probably about 5 inches and it's oval. Well, rubber, as you know, as we know with the Tesla headlights, there's a rubber cup behind there, and that's the reason that you get dust and bugs in there eventually. It gets dry, it gets brittle, it loses its elasticity, so it no longer seals the same. And some of the early Tesla Model S problems were because water got past that little boot that covers up those connectors, the CAN connectors and the power connector. And of course, what's underneath it is an opening to the battery pack. And you don't want water in your battery pack because now you get electrolysis. You've got a lot of voltage floating around in there. And once the car senses that, then it starts throwing all the BMS errors.
Right. Right. So while I don't think the cars break as easily as an ICE vehicle could, the results when they do break are typically more catastrophic than what you have with an ICE vehicle. So I would be with you up in my panda tree. Don't drive your car through big, deep mud puddles.
And there's another issue. There's another issue with the Tesla Roadsters, which is storage method. Here in Arizona, you can probably get away with storing a car in a carport unless you have rodents, for example, which is also a possibility. But if you live in a wet climate, we're talking about the UK, we're talking about parts of Europe, and you leave your Roadster outside, what ends up happening is there's constantly water going past the hood vanes. If you look at the front of that car there behind us, you see those slats? Well, there's about an inch and a half gap between those. And what's underneath it is your condenser assembly. And your condenser assembly is basically a radiator for your AC.
Mm-hmm.
As the water hits that aluminum, those fins, and worse yet, you get leaves that eventually migrate down in there. Those leaves get wet. And now you have an acidic condition where the acid begins to attack the aluminum. And the aluminum, of course, is very thin because what you have is a condenser assembly with tiny little flat tubes. Mm-hmm. It eventually works its way through those fins and through those galleys, and you end up with leaks. And now your condenser assembly needs to be replaced. Some preventive things you can do, obviously, is leave it inside. Don't leave it out in the rain. The second one is get the leaves out of there every once in a while and, clear that portion of your front hood. That will help as well.
Well, I realize no car is waterproof. All cars have some level of water resistance. The Roadster just tends to have a little bit less water resistance and weather resistance than most other cars because of things like those open hood vanes.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, going through a 3-foot puddle like that customer in China did with their Model S, I would never recommend that with a Roadster because you have a number of things that are going to be affected. You've got fans, 2 of them, sitting very low in the back of the car. And as you're going through the water, it's going to suck up the water. It's going to be exposed to all of that mud or whatever else is in the water. And,
it's going to be blowing water right onto the PEM, basically.
Right, yeah.
Oh, that would be spectacular when that blows up.
It would cool it better, though, if you think about it.
Probably
Maybe there's
would.
a design improvement there, right? We're using water cooling now. All right.
Yes. On TikTok, USIF asks, I wonder how many sensors are used in the inverter, current, volt, and temperature. And is there a difference between the number of sensors used on a Roadster and the number of sensors for Model S? Is there a diagnosis algorithm for sensor or component faults embedded inside the vehicle?
There are some similarities between the Tesla Roadster and the later version Teslas, but I can safely say that there was a major redesign done in the later Tesla vehicles. And not all of the design on the Roadster was performed by Tesla, by the way, like Chroma, for example, in Taiwan, that was responsible for the power electronics module. There is a difference between the number of sensors, the types of sensors, what it's sensing. A lot of that is not common. However, then there are other areas. In our service center in the electronics lab, we have typically a number of power electronic modules out of the Tesla Roadster. And off to the side, we have a Tesla Model S inverter. It looks substantially different. It's round, whereas the PEM in the Roadster is a rectangular, flat type arrangement. And despite being much larger and heavier than the Model S version, the Tesla Roadster power electronic module or inverter puts out a lot less power than the Tesla Model S. So there are some substantial differences. The firmware, on the other hand, it's going to be looking for similar things. Reporting on current, temperature, timing functions. So looks like RC Robinson Sand from YouTube. He says, hey guys, There is a picture on Reddit of a Roadster in San Francisco that has weeds growing up through the wheels. Wow. Well,
Jesse, I just put that image into our images library. If you can pull up a Roadster Weeds, we can see a picture of that Roadster. There we go.
oh, yeah, you're not kidding.
Holy cow. And that's
Twilight blue.
Twilight Blue Tesla Roadster. There's the 7 spokes. Weeds growing through the wheel. That's crazy.
If I had to guesstimate what's going on here, I would say this might be a brick Roadster, and it hasn't quite yet made it to our shop.
I would venture a guess that you're right there, that they just might not know about what we could do to help them get their Roadster back on the road.
What their options are, yes. And it looks like the seats, it's got that light gray saddle type seat, which is not common, by the way, but it's a good combination.
Yeah, makes for a beautiful car. But the headlights are pretty badly fogged. It looks like the paint could use some work. Pretty cool. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, R.C. Robinson. On Instagram, the Cybertruck puts positive air pressure into the battery pack before entering a flooded area or stream when off-roading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been talk about that, which would definitely help and prevent some of that water ingress.
I think it's a great idea. By the way, I wanted to see if Jesse could pull up another picture. This was just a little fun. You have the picture of what a Roadster would look like after it landed on Mars. And I had my own take on what that picture is. Jesse, if you could look up the picture, I think it's called Ash Pile. And that's kind of what I think it would look like once it landed on Mars as it went through the atmosphere and stuff.
Oh, wow. And we even have some exhaust tubes there.
Well, of
it looks
course.
like, yeah.
Yeah, this is still not letting me pull up images. Can you tell me where did you find it? I'll just go grab it real quick.
Oh goodness! I just went out onto the internet and
You just found it out there. Okay.
I just found it's kind of a random picture.
I could show all of our images, but it's not allowing me to actually open it. So I can show this, so you can see it there, but it's just kind of small. Let me see if I can zoom it in here.
There you go.
Yeah, if you can. I'm sorry to hear that that's not working. That's kind of our.
I think that's about as much as we're gonna get, but let me see if I can find a way to open this here.
All right. Well, while Jesse's doing that, there's some other images here that we wanted to load for you guys. I can go into the verbal portion of the upgrades that people ask for. And on our website, by the way, there is a section called pricing, which is available to people that have emailed us and asked for a link to that section.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested, just send your request to ev@gruber.com. And there is a section that has probably 20 or 25 different upgrades that people want done to their Roadsters while they are here for various types of service. And a lot of these make sense. What people do is they pick from them based on their budget. They pick from them based on their preference. And some of those are a 12-volt battery relocation for the 2.X Roadsters.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that's popular is, for those of you that have the 2.0 Roadsters, every 3 years, you've got to change that little motorcycle battery underneath the passenger front fender, underneath the headlight, behind some of the fender skirts. And for those that don't have a lot of tools and are faint of heart, this is not an easy replacement. Some guys end up tempting it, but if you take it to a Tesla service center, you're looking at $500 to $700 to replace that battery. By doing a battery relocation into the trunk, what then happens is there's a little meter on there that tells you when it's starting to go out. And when it does, you pop open a little latch, you get a $40 battery from us, you slide that back in, 2 fast-on tabs, and you're back in business for about $40. So the way we sell this is you spend $500 to $600 just one more time, and from then on, it's $40.
Right.
So that's kind of a no-brainer. A lot of people like that option. Then we have the LED replacement for the headlights. Now, Tesla came out originally with incandescent bulbs, and they had an HID upgrade, which was brighter, but it required a power supply, and the bulbs are expensive. And then the technology eventually moved to high-intensity LEDs, which is where the future is now.
Right.
What we do is replace all of the old technology in your headlights with LEDs. And if you want to go a step further, change the LEDs inside your cabin as well and your trunk. You're drawing less current. Your battery, it's negligible, but you'll get more mileage out of your battery because the incandescent bulbs draw more current than the LEDs.
Sure.
And, of course, the brightness is substantially different. You know, when you have your high beams on, people will definitely let you know, versus the old incandescent bulbs where they might typically laugh at you if you had your high beams on going down the road.
I have this image up, and then Mark, if you want to maybe try and re-add your image, I can try and pull it up again later, but I got these ones to work.
Okay.
Well, let's go through this list then, and I'll pick up the same one that you have. The most popular upgrade that we have is the power electronics rebuild in the upper left-hand corner. And this is kind of a no-brainer. You know, your cars, some of them are 15, now 16 years old. They've got components in that PEM that have an 8-year shelf life, like the electrolytic capacitors. And when you have a PEM problem, it typically doesn't go quietly in the night. There's some fireworks involved, and you end up with parts that are no longer in production that may be damaged. In most cases, we can repair the circuit boards. But when you get into the multi-layer boards, where there's a lot of real estate sandwiched between the top and bottom portion, it gets very dicey. It also gets very expensive because it takes a lot of time to attempt to repair those. So getting that power electronics module rebuilt is the ICE equivalent of getting a performance exotic car engine rebuild, where they change the rings, the pistons, regrind the valves. It basically puts new life into your car. And we recommend that if you're going to go through the 3.0 battery upgrade, which is going to give you another 15 to 20 years life on the car, you might as well do the PEM at the same time.
Right.
And synchronize the two for lifespan.
Absolutely.
The one to the right of that is that's the battery relocation that we talked about. And you can see that little utility a case in the trunk of the car now. To the right of that are the coolant pumps. The one at the top is the most problematic. What you're looking at there is a 12-volt DC brush motor. And those of you familiar with motors, it's the most wear item type motor made because you have two brushes that are the equivalent of pencil erasers. And they're constantly in contact with a commutator, which is a round ring of little copper pads, and it's continuously rubbing off those brushes. Then you have bearings inside this motor, which anybody that works around mechanical product realizes bearings have a life as well.
Uh-huh.
They're in constant motion. You're constantly, turning them. So we recommend that this pump gets replaced every 5 to 7 years. The downside to not doing it is it's part of your thermal management system that keeps your battery, the main ESS battery, cool. And as they begin to deteriorate, you're changing the cubic feet per minute flow that gets in through your battery system. And it eventually will go out completely. One of the failure symptoms is a moaning noise, or if you're hearing a loud, grinding noise. These pumps will do that. The ones down below that are the 2.X battery coolant pumps. And these are a much better design. They're actually impeller driven, which means there's a magnetic, or they're magnets inside the vanes inside. And then you have the equivalent of a stepper motor signal being fed to it. So you don't get the friction that you do in your in the pump above. But again, we recommend those. They're not that expensive. It's a vital component in your Roadster. Replace those periodically, at least every 5 to 7 years. Now we have the LED conversion, and there you can see the two headlight bulbs. To the right of that, we have the peeling headlight repair. Interested if you're interested, on our website, we have much better pictures of this. The GPS firmware fix is another item that will you get corruption in your log file. Basically, you don't get the correct dates. Now we have a workaround. We have an algorithm that actually resets those dates from a reporting standpoint.
Right.
But it can be repaired, and if you get a PEM rebuild, it is part of that process.
Yeah, that's one of those behind the scenes things. You might not visibly see a lot of benefit to it, but the first time you have to give a log file to somebody and your GPS software has been updated, that person who's trying to do the repair both thanks you and is able to do the diagnosis a lot more quickly.
Right. The next one down behind me are the PEM cooling fans. And again, this is a 2 DC brush motors. Same problems that you have with that 1.5 or 1.0 coolant pump. These fans need to be replaced, and we recommend every 5 to 7 years. The ideal time to do that is when your Roadster is in for repair. It's up on a lift. Things are accessible. It's going to be less expensive than the tow charge to get it to the Tesla Service Center. By the way, my first Tesla Roadster before we had Gruber Motor Company, my Lightning Green.
Yeah.
I'm driving down the street one day in South Phoenix, and I'm in the middle lane, and suddenly my car stops functioning. And I'm used to, with my Mopars, you pop the hood, you hit the side of the carburetor to free up the float. You get your, some, starter fluid down the throat of the carburetor. You start it back up and you pull off the side of the road, or you put it in tow mode, with the old Mopars or with any ICE engine into neutral, and you push it off the side of the road. Well, this car was stuck there. It wouldn't go anywhere. It wouldn't do anything. And of course, traffic is going around both sides of me. A PEM cooling fan can cause a problem like that, especially if it affects the PEM. Then you have your TPMS sensors. Replace those things. First thing we ask is, when was the last time they were replaced? And then based on that, we make a recommendation.
Typical tire stores will say you want to replace a TPMS sensor every 5 years or so. Mm-hmm. Is that what we recommend for these as well?
Exactly, yes. And then you have your trunk LED lights, changing to LEDs inside the cabin. And let's get the next recommended list of items up, and that would be upgrade 2.
And while that picture is coming up here, let's grab just a couple of questions real quick. Luis on TikTok, give us a thumbs up. Thank you. HD Steve on TikTok says, on deceleration, how do the brake lights compensate between the electric motor and the driver hitting the brake?
Good question. Have you ever driven behind a Tesla Roadster and watched when they let off the accelerator?
Not.
Well, the brake lights come on.
Sure.
They come on with all the later model S's as well.
I've seen it with my wife's Volvo. I'll be driving behind her, and as soon as she hits to slow down, her brake lights come on.
Right, and that's a great safety feature when you think about it, because you don't want anybody slamming into your, the back of your car, not paying attention. Although that happens a lot these days. You know how many people don't pay attention on the road anymore?
Oh, it's terrible.
And then Highlander says, I think it's safe to say that the Gruber gang know my electrical skills, but I'm very weak in software. What do you recommend, especially for young girls, his nieces?
What I would recommend on software, do what's necessary to just help them get computer literate and comfortable with the computer. If they're still young girls, make sure that they're on the computer, learning how to use it, learning the basics of Word and Excel and some of these other programs that are out there. That's the beginnings. Then have them work into some sort of basic scripting language. It kind of doesn't matter what it is. Mm-hmm. Have them do cool things like create an app for their phone on the computer, and then learn how to export that app to the phone and have them run stuff. It's fun, and it opens up their skills. Mm-hmm. Eventually, you're gonna want to get them into some sort of Linux or Unix type software. But to start with, it's just about computer literacy. because then when they're a little bit older, they have an idea of where they want to go, and you can then look up more specifically what kind of software is on the car at that point in time, and you can and they'll have that background in computer literacy to be able to do stuff.
Good answer. Thank you, Mark. Instagram, Dan Puerto Rico. Great podcast as usual. I think I know who that is. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. On Instagram, Khaled2539 sends us 3 roses. Thank you very much.
Instagram, Forza_1. What's the website address, please? It's Gruber Motors. Gruber Motors, all one word.com. And
then Highlander says a very good explanation on DC motors, which it was, Pete. It was an excellent explanation.
Thank you. So going on to the next page there, we have your annual maintenance. Now, this is something that you don't want to skip, and it depends on how often you drive your car or where you live. We had one customer that lives on a dirt road, and he was amazed that he needed an annual every 3 to 4 months.
Right.
Well, you've got the vacuum cleaner fans down below that are doing their best job of filling up these heat sinks with dust, dirt, and debris. If you don't drive your car that much, you could probably go a couple of years. One of the telltale signs that you've got a problem is during summer, you'll begin to see that you're going into power limiting mode. Your PEM is overheating, in other words. Your ESS pack is overheating. Then we've got the OVMS black box there in the middle. We highly recommend this to anyone that has a Tesla Roadster because the Tesla Roadster originally had the ability using a 2G network to communicate with the service centers, and they would use that. They would be able to tune into your car, like me being stuck in the middle lane, and tell me what was wrong with it over the phone. Well, as a 2G network went dead, a team headed up by Mark Webb Johnson, developed a replacement for this capability, and that's called the OVMS, Open Vehicle Management System. And when you put one of these into your Roadster, not only can service organizations like us get in your car, but you can get in your car through your cell phone. One of the highest probability bricking type issues is someone going on vacation, cruise for a month or so. Lightning rolls through, trips the breaker that has been charging their Roadster and keeping it alive, and they get back to find a brick car. With an OVMS system, it will send you an alert and say, your state of charge is getting low. Here's the level. Now it gives you a chance to call your neighbor. Can you reset my breaker? Can you do something with this?
Yeah, I mean, it's even something as simple as the GFI is starting to go out on the charge cord, and it pops because it's starting to get resistance. The amperage, the current going through it goes too high, and you happen to be gone for the weekend. You drove your Roadster on Friday, you brought it back, you put it in the garage Friday night, it's at 30%, and you're not going to be back till next Wednesday. Guess what? It might lose most of that 30% between Friday and the following Wednesday.
So it tells you a lot of information about what's going on with your car. To the right of that is a neoprene hose. This is about 18 to 20 inches or so. It is rubber. When Tesla originally installed this transition from the fans down below, the vacuum cleaner fans as I call them, to your power electronic module heat sinks, they used nylon tie wraps. And as these things have aged 15 years, nylon gets brittle, cracks, pops. The neoprene hose, the neoprene gets rigid, it gets dried out, it gets fissured, and you have cracks in that, so you're not getting the amount of cooling that you need to get to your power electronics module. Again, this is one of those, it's so inexpensive to replace this that it's just a good measure to take care of while the car is apart.
Right.
And instead of using nylon tie wraps, if you notice, we have stainless steel tie wraps, which will probably outlast the car.
Probably will.
All right, and then we have the front bumper, the nose cone. We repair scratches and recoat. This is a part that gets abused badly at times, especially speed bumps, driveways, if you're not going across at an angle. And I don't think we see any Roadsters other than the VIN 592 38-mile Roadster, which is perfect, by the way. The next one is these little struts that hold up your rear trunk. You know they're bad because when you click, nothing happens. It just sits there. You have to lift your trunk, and then you have to get a stick or something to prop it to keep it open. Some customers actually keep that stick in their trunk. You don't have to do that anymore. These struts are designed for the load, for the weight of that trunk lid. And those are, again, an inexpensive feature that can easily be replaced and put that trunk lid back in motion so that when you click it, oftentimes it will just lift it by itself.
Right.
Performance brakes. Any of you that drive Roadsters probably realize that it doesn't quite brake the same as your Chevy Tahoe. The brakes are undersized is the bottom line. There is an upgrade to the brake system that we developed a few years ago that not only makes the brakes look a lot better, it's a two-hat design, but it also improves the stopping power tremendously, making your drive a lot safer.
And that's because these brakes on the Lotus, the Lotus Elise, right? That's what this car is off of. That was about 1,000 pounds lighter car.
Yeah.
And yet these are still the original Lotus brakes. They were never engineered to handle the heavier weight of the Roadster.
Exactly. They do their best, but you can improve it and improve your margin for error.
Yes.
Quick question. Nolver53 says, where in orbit is Musk's Roadster? All I know is it's 4 trillion miles from here currently, and it does orbit around the sun.
Yeah, I believe that there's a site that you can go to. I don't know right offhand, but I've heard of it before, where you can actually track the orbit of the Roadster.
That's true. That's true. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So Nolver53 continues and says, I've missed a lot of the podcasts because of overtime at work. Very tired waking up in the morning. You all have a blessed and very successful new year. Thank you. We hope for the best for you as well.
Yeah. Crunch is chiming in from YouTube. He says, have modern Teslas been engineered to avoid those debris collectors and ordinary wearing issues from the Roadsters? Yes, yes, yes. The Tesla Roadster is a prototype vehicle. It was a proof of concept vehicle. I know that it was released to the public, and the serviceability in some ways is questionable. And that's why companies like us exist. But there have been major improvements in the Teslas, and of course the market response to Teslas as being one of the premier cars on the planet today is a testament to those improvements. But yeah, you can't look back at the Tesla Roadster and draw conclusions about what the next level of engineering at Tesla is.
Right. On Instagram, Soul to Soul says, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Behind me is the trunk release actuator. This is a simple solenoid. A solenoid is basically a coil with a metal pin, and as you magnetize the coil, it pulls on the pin and it performs an action, in this case, releasing the trunk latches. As time goes on, there's a rubber boot over this little solenoid, and dust and dirt gets inside there, grime, it gets stiff, it gets difficult to transition. It's so cheap, it's worth replacing. And that way you'll avoid having the typical scenario where you've got stuff in the trunk of the car. True story, I did that in summer here. It was 114 outside. Just got back from the grocery store with a watermelon, ice cream, groceries, vegetables, and I went to open my trunk to bring everything in and put some stuff in the freezer, and my trunk wouldn't open. And of course, that was before I had Gruber Motor Company, and I had no idea what to do next. So the ice cream eventually melted. We finally got it open. I had to open up the side, take off the fender wheel well, the wheel, all of that, and was able to finagle it and get it open. That's what you're going to avoid by replacing the solenoid. Then we've got things like the paint brake calipers. Paint those red. They are, powder coating is the only way to do this. We used to use the same things that most body shops do, which is paint the calipers.
Right.
And as soon as you hit that with some brake cleaner, the paint's going to run off. Powder coating is durable. It will outlast your car. And then we've got the 120-volt charge cable AC plug. This is called a GFI plug, stands for ground fault interrupter. And it's a safety item. If you have a grounding issue, which could make the car live instead of tripping a breaker, this little connector will actually turn off. Well, there's a little circuit board in this connector, and that circuit board, after 5 to 8 years, is shot. And what we find is that some Roadsters that have been bricked are the result of this connector going bad. It's so inexpensive to replace. We recommend customers that ship their cars to us, put that yellow charge cable in the car in the trunk, and we'll replace your connector for you, giving you a new lease on life for charging.
Well, it
We
looks
can
like
probably save the last part. We're not done yet. We've got more upgrades.
we even have more.
Yeah.
I think we could probably save that for next week, though. We're just about out of time here.
That's what I'm thinking, yes. And I think we've got another comment there, and let's see if there's anything else here.
The last comment I think we have is from Soul to Stone. He says, "Good afternoon, gentlemen." And so good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us.
And if we are we able to bring up pictures, Jesse? It's not working again. Okay. We're going to fix that before the next time. I was going to show you one of our mechanics took a picture of a sunset in our shop, and it's just spectacular.
Oh,
with
that
the
one's
Roadster in
that
front
one we
of it.
want to see.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like we are running out of time here. I do
Okay,
have
wait a minute.
another update for you, though.
That one
a couple
worked.
of them, actually.
That one did
Um,
work, Pete.
My my headset is dead right now, so. I
Oh,
can
your
just-
headset's dead. I said
Yeah.
that image it worked. I got it.
Oh, you got it to work. Oh, there you go. Okay. Mike Manning, suspension expert, excellent mechanic, seasoned, is also a photographer. And what he comes up with just is mind-blowing at times. This was one morning at the shop. Now, granted, he's pushed the saturation on the portion that is sunrise, but I thought it was a highly professional picture based on the setting.
Not supposed to give away the editing, Pete.
Oh, okay. Prompt engineering.
It still looks very much like a real picture, though, and that's not too far off of what we actually see in the mornings
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in the evenings as well for sunsets.
Right. We have a new Roadster owner that chimed into the Tesla Roadster Owners group. By the way, let me give a shout out to the people that participate on that Facebook site. This is a Facebook site that is dedicated to Roadster owners. Occasionally, we'll let someone in that used to have one or Tesla employees. But what you're going to find out there, no tire kickers, these are Tesla Roadster owners that oftentimes have a story to tell or updates. This particular owner just bought a Tesla Roadster, and it's VIN number 220, if you can pop up that picture, Jesse. It is a beautiful Arctic white. And what is so amazing about this car is the mileage.
I'm restarting the laptop trying to get the images.
Okay, we're going to restart. It has something just under 600 miles. And a lot of questions were asked and some inputs. Thomas West, for example, said, "Congratulations and welcome. This is a beautiful spec, similar to his VP24. You might be surprised to learn that 2 Arctic White Roadsters before yours in sequence, VIN 200 and 210. And this is VIN number 240, I believe." Then I congratulated him. We were somewhat involved in the sale, or at least aware of it. I said, "You have a very rare Tesla Roadster, and now this one joins the very small list of extremely low mileage Roadsters." And then someone else said, or the owner of this car said, "Thanks, Pete, looks great in my warehouse." And someone else piped up and said, "I hope that's not code for don't drive it, because, well, you have to." Now, we have some very definite ideas about these highly pedigreed, extremely low mileage Roadsters. In fact, we have a couple of collectors that have some in our service center. And they tell us, when you do any repairs on this, we don't want to see any test driving because that mileage has to stay right where it's at.
Yep.
And that, of course, is part of the value of these cars. Our suggestion to anyone that has paid a lot of money for a pedigreed, low mileage Roadster, buy yourself another daily driver and keep this one under wraps somewhere.
Right.
It's going to increase in value. If, however, you can't afford that second Tesla Roadster, well, put one of these low mileage ones on the road and, count your blessings that you didn't pay too much for it. And then, of course, the invariable questions: how much did it cost? Usually, owners are unwilling to talk about that. And in this case, that seems to be the case. We're not getting any valuation on this one. But a lot of encouragement. Drive it weekly is one guy. Another one says, have fun, enjoy your Roadster. All right.
And I have this image working now.
Oh, we got it working? Okay.
Ah, yes, this is what the
I
Roadster,
already showed the 221.
the Roadster that might look, what it might look like once it crashes on Mars or another planet.
Yeah.
You know?
By the way, that white one that we just talked about was VIN number 220, Arctic white, very low mileage, just under 600 miles, and without any indication what it was purchased for.
Well, I think that's about it for this time. And
Oh, I got one more.
you have one more?
VIN 592, if you can
Oh,
bring that
that's
up,
right.
Jesse.
It has sold.
That's right.
I don't
The
have an image of 592.
lowest, it's out there.
That is our 38-mile Roadster that was up for
Yeah.
sale, and it's
I
no
have
longer
the Sunrise
for sale.
and then I have VIN 220. Those are the only two in the folder.
Under Roadster images, I'm seeing VIN 592. Is it maybe a PNG file? Well, what this does is it shows the bid progression.
Oh, this isn't a Roadster image. This is something else.
Yeah, this is the
Gotcha. I
big
thought you were looking for the
image.
picture of the car.
Oh yeah, no.
Oh, no, this is text. So for those of you that have been following this, after the Chinese Roadsters, we thought we'd never find low mileage Roadsters like this ever again, right? 100 some odd miles. Turns out that along comes VIN number 592, which has 38 original miles, certified, verified by us. We went into VMS. We figured out, that we corroborated the 38 miles. So then, unlike the Chinese Roadsters, which were sitting for 13 years in dark sea containers and rodent damage, that had taken up residence in the sea containers, built nests inside the cars,
Right.
that type of thing. This car is absolutely pristine. We have never, in our years of working on Roadsters, seen one that has been this clean or this new. And for those of you curious, if you go to our website under Roadsters for Sale, it's the third one down. Look at the pictures. There are over 100 of them. And you'll see the insides, the suspension components, which prove that this car was never driven. It has 8 miles on it, which was a trip to a service center right after it was purchased for the annual preventive maintenance, and from there it sat. So we have no idea what the value of a car like this should be because there's no comp value. And, in the world of real estate, if you're curious about what your house is going to sell for, you want to list it, they look at comp values in your neighborhood and you immediately know what the price per square foot is and, what you're going to be able to get for that, for that house. In this case, there was nothing, so we do these for bid type sales. And you can see the offers there up through the 9th offer. And it turns out that the final bid was accepted by the seller. They had asked us to make that an undisclosed sum and not publicize the final selling price of this car. And it is going to a couple of collectors that are very much committed to the Tesla Roadsters. In fact, it's going to be on display at some point once they build a Tesla Roadster cafe. And the goal with this car is going to be to put it partially in plexiglass, raise it up, and with mirrors show the underside of the car. It's pristine
that's
condition.
fantastic.
I'm highly supporting that, by the way. A car like this, putting it back on the road just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, but doing something like that would be fantastic.
So anyway, the good news is after a couple of months, this car sold and it is now off the market and it's going to very good hands. Someone that appreciates Roadsters and will continue to preserve it. One final question from Tik Tok. Hectic G69, can you change the IGBTs to SIC FETs and upgrade the Roadster? That's been a burning question for some time. The problem is that these boards are no longer in production. You could probably fit something on this particular board because there are very few bias resistors on here, but there's a driver board that sits on top of this, which has been out of production since 2008. And you would have to change some of the components on that board in order to accommodate and change the firmware. And no one in the independent space like us has seen the I guess the willingness to go through that great expense to do something like that.
Well, yeah, not only is it potentially expensive, it's a small market. And if you fail, you've lost a part that's irreplaceable.
Mm-hmm.
So the risk is really high. The return and the reward is actually pretty low, but it is a wonderful idea.
And what we don't know yet is how the mechanical components, such as the drive motor and the gearbox, are going to respond to a substantial increase in power.
Yes, exactly.
Half shafts and all of that. Well, as always, we really appreciate everyone joining us. There's a TikTok final question just came in from Jerry Diaz. What do we think of BYD?
Probably the biggest competitor to Tesla in the world, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I have a huge amount of respect for them, even though BYD is as yet not in the U.S. I think they're trying to work on manufacturing in Mexico so that they can start bringing their cars into the U.S. that way.
And those of you interested in these types of questions or these types of companies, we are starting a new video series now, and there are two different types. There is the Spotlight On series, which is going to be the history of these types of companies. Where did they come from? How are they funded? Who are the players within the company? Who are the investors? With BYD, for example, who's the rich old guy? I can't think of his name now.
Oh, I don't remember right off the top of my head. It's
Berkshire Hathaway.
Oh, yeah, Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett is an investor in BYD.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But the
Not
point here
surprised, though.
being is these videos are going to reveal a lot of these facts about these EV companies, and they'll be posted out on our YouTube site. The second series we're starting is a series of who the CEOs of these companies are. How did they get into the business? You know, Mary Barra, J.D. Scaringe with Rivian. And of course, Elon will be thrown in there as well.
Of course.
And Pete Rawlinson with Lucid. People are curious, I think. What is their background? What was their childhood like? What got them interested in electric vehicles? What experience do they have? What education? Where were they born? You know, when were they born? You know, those types of things. So for those of you interested, keep an eye on our YouTube channel because we feel these will be highly informative and answer a lot of these types of questions.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We will be here at 10 o'clock next week. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock is the AI podcast.
AI podcast. So much news.
Yes. The Gruber Power Hour is Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And then next Monday is the Wired Hour is what they're calling it with the Gruber Communication Products.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Take care.